Does Genshin need new weapon types? While not really a priority discussion topic if you've been playing since version 1, this kind of question has surfaced at least once or twice in your online life. Many players have brought this up mostly in the name of fun theory crafting and not something that needs immediate attention, but at the same time discussion is always meant to bring to light conjecture and opinion, which is exactly the kind of stuff I like to make on this channel. I have gone over weapons in the past, namely criticizing the way it was structured in that it can be prohibitively restricting for players who justifiably don't want to spend the same amount of money it takes to get a character on a piece of equipment. Aside from that though, every so often there would be a post on the Genshin subreddit talking about how more weapon variety would do some good, especially now that the roster is getting bigger and bigger. I figured this would make for a fun, lighthearted discussion topic, so for today, let's talk about this video's title. It's been a while since we discussed weapons in detail, so let's quickly go over them. One moment though, for my PC gacha gamers out there, or even if you play Genshin on mobile, you might want to check this out for your computer games. I partnered up with Java for today's video. Java is a trusty online platform where you can buy and sell parts and commission custom builds at good prices. They have an individually curated group of verified sellers and tech experts that can advise you on building the right computer for you. One way they do this is through the Commission Builds program, where you can fill out a series of questions about what kind of PC you're looking for, the games you want to play, performance you want, and the site will pair you up with a verified seller to make the custom build suited towards your preferences. Additionally, they also have a marketplace where you can directly buy and sell parts to other users, or Java can buy your GPU directly. If you're trying to upgrade your current rig but want to sell the parts first to offset the cost, you can do so right here, as Java can take your GPU right off your hands rather than you having to go through the trouble of finding buyers, although you do have to for the other parts. They have a big Discord community with great customer support as well as game nights, contests, and giveaways. So if you're big on computer gaming, then take a visit to Java and see what they have using my link in the description. Thanks again to Java for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back to it. Currently we have 5 weapon types: swords, claymores, polearms, catalysts, and bows. The first 3 make up the melee category, with all their attacks dealing physical damage to enemies in their radius. Claymores trade attack speed for more range and damage per swing, along with the added property of being considered blunt attacks, so they break material shields, ores, and geo-objects at a considerably faster rate. Polearms and swords are mostly the same, with the exception that polearms have slightly longer range. To my knowledge, they have the same attack speed, making the former infinitely better for all intents and purposes. The last 2 weapons make up the ranged category. Bows also do physical damage with their normal attacks, but only target one enemy at a time in exchange for more range, naturally. But if you switch to aim shot mode after charging for a brief moment, your next attack deals elemental damage corresponding to the user's vision. Catalysts, on the other hand, always deal elemental damage at mid-range, while their charged and plunging attacks deal AoE elemental damage. This does come at the cost of typically less attack speed and more stamina consumption for charge attacks. That's the gist of weapon types in this game. Not the most rudimentary system out there, but it still falls under a bare-bones structure. Things get more sophisticated when we factor in their passives and whatnot, but overall that's the long and short of weapons. Now, to assess whether or not we need more weapon types, we first have to look at what purpose these weapons serve in Genshin. Like in any video game, weapons are a character's vehicle for dealing damage. Without a weapon, they can't attack. Typically, weapons come with an assortment of stats and properties to distinguish one from another. In this case, we have the main attack stat and a secondary substat, which can come in the form of things like percent attack, crit rate, crit damage, elemental mastery, defense, energy recharge, what have you. Then there's a passive attached to it that usually entails more combat stats. Some may have unique perks, like the sacrificial series resetting your elemental skills cooldown, allowing you to cast it twice in succession. But that aside, weapons in Genshin are almost exclusively stat sticks. They do little, if anything, to fundamentally alter the character's animation or functions. When it comes to RPGs, they usually go in one of 2 directions. One is the aforementioned approach, where the purpose of a weapon is to influence a character's stat line. The benefit of this is that more focus is placed on the character's own capabilities, something you see very often in gachas, as the whole premise of them is to collect and use different units. The other direction is for the point of emphasis to be on the weapons themselves. Zelda Breath of the Wild is a quintessential example of this. Link is the only person you're really going to play. How you adjust and format your playstyle is in the various weapons and tools you use. You can use boomerangs, one-handed melee weapons, rods, and so on, with each of them having very distinct applications that set them apart from even other weapons of the same class. Both have their benefits, it just comes down to what the developer prefers when making the game. Anyways, back to Genshin. Obviously, the point of emphasis is on the character's own abilities. So in this case, the weapons should not be the focus of attention, as that would take away from the units themselves, especially since the essential experience of the game is predicated on elemental combinations. And more importantly, being a gacha game, characters are intended, keyword intended, to stay within the boundaries of their design constraints. Hypothetically, if we imagined they added a bow that, say, fired 3 arrows instead of 1, how would that affect the game's balance and experience? It would do a lot of things. Suddenly, any bow user who can imbue the normal attacks like Yoimiya would be substantially more powerful with that specific bow since it effectively triples her pyro application. Or what if there was a bow that fired explosive arrows? That would make someone like Ganyu exceedingly overpowered, as she could proc reverse melt on her own frostflake arrows. That may sound really exciting, but once again it draws attention away from Yoimiya/Ganyu and puts it on those specific weapons. At that point, it's not whether or not X character is strong, it's about whether or not X character can use that weapon, if that makes sense. Because of this, weapons are for the most part entirely nominal, especially nowadays. Back then, one advantage Diluc had over Kuting, aside from being the superior element at the time, was that he was a greatsword user, so it was much easier dealing with shield hilichurls or farming crystal ore. However, in the present, I can't remember the last time a character's weapon actually mattered. Not saying it doesn't. Functionally, what weapon you use on a character greatly influences their efficiency, but I was referring to like animations and actual effects. The Catalyst weapon type was colloquially regarded as the worst weapon type in the game. While it dealt elemental damage, players weren't too happy with its exorbitantly high stamina cost and clunky attack animations. Thing is, that stamina cost and clunky animations were endemic to the characters, not the weapon type. It was just how MiHoYo designed normal and charge attacks for the archetype. Some Catalyst users had good animations like Yanfei, or Ningguangming's talk about how her single double blast normal attack is quite nice. You can look at newer Catalyst users like Wanderer, can move and fly around while attacking. Or Hazel straight up doesn't cast range attacks and goes full on Street Fighter. Freaking Dia drops her greatsword altogether when using her burst and does a 10-hit combo on you like a character from Tekken. Even early on in Genshin, we had Child, who was a bow user but had an elemental skill that let him use daggers and a spear. Seeing as how weapons primarily serve to be as unobtrusive as possible in that it doesn't want to cause any drastic alterations to the characters that can use them, the short answer is no, Genshin doesn't need more weapon types because that's not the focus of Genshin's combat. The focus is the character. Weapons serve to assist in their own abilities. You would use the sacrificial weapons to make it easier for them to get their burst back up or use their elemental skill if more uses of it contributes to more DPS uptime. In actuality though, Hu Tao's Staff of Homa is no different from Dragon's Bane or Deathmatch in the grand scheme of things. It's just that Staff of Homa is better on her due to giving more stats that are conducive to Hu Tao's game plan. That's it. By that logic, adding more weapon types is not a necessity. Yula could attack you with an AK-47, Thor's hammer, a forklift, or a body pillow of amber for all the difference it actually makes. With that said, does that mean there's no benefit to adding weapons? No. How you go about it can greatly enhance the game's experience if you follow up with a correspondence on the other side. One place where I think this was done nicely was in Minecraft, believe it or not. Back in update 1.9, even though like most people I was unhappy with the combat changes overall, I appreciated the attempt they made to diversify weapon types a bit. Before 1.9, swords were the only weapons you ever wanted to use. They did the most damage and could also block to mitigate incoming damage. But after 1.9, they removed the ability for you to block with a sword and added shields. Shields negated any and all damage coming from attacks originating from the direction you were facing. Now that would seem kind of unfair, as the player could turn around faster than their opponent could move to attack their exposed sides or behind. In response to this, Minecraft gave Axes the property to disable shields for a short moment, giving players a worthwhile alternative weapon to carry in PvP. If memory serves, Axes also do more damage to armor durability than swords, so you would essentially forego attack speed for more breaking power, kind of like how greatswords in Genshin attack slower but are considered heavy attacks. At the moment, Genshin doesn't have any correspondence to weapon types. They have correspondence to elements, such as the Hydro Abyss Herald being weak to cryo damage, but there's no difference what weapon you use. If in the foreseeable future they added content that necessitated a certain weapon type, then that could allow for there to still be a focus on the characters while adding meaningful decision making to weapon types. Some enemies kinda do that. The Rune Hunters were a tad bit harder than Rune Guards to deal with because they could fly in the air, rendering melee weapons unusable, so you had to use a bow aimed shot to knock them down first. Doesn't even have to be that big. We can make it so an enemy requires a certain number of attacks, regardless of strength, to cancel out their attack or something. I would argue that could make for a good excuse to add gauntlets. In most RPGs, gauntlet weapons trade range for much faster attack speed, so by adding a boss or type of mob with an attack that would insta-kill you unless you landed 100 hits on them, a gauntlet user can do that much faster than a greatsword user. On that note, this could be a good way to retroactively balance out the existing 5 weapon types. Polearms are currently the best of the 3 melee weapons on account of having more range than a sword without sacrificing any speed, but maybe they can make swords attack faster by virtue of them being lighter than a spear. Anyway, that's one way we can add more weapon types. I'm not sure how far MiHoYo is going to go in terms of technological advancements, but if say Natlan was a more industrialized nation, then they could add a cannon weapon type. cannons could automatically come with an explosive property that can be used to deal with enemies that need to be dealt heavy pyro damage or something. So if you can't easily achieve overload, then you can use a cannon unit instead. These kinds of scenarios would justify adding more weapon types, but therein lies the condition. Weapons, like any other game mechanic, are only as engaging as the opposition they're being used on. Version 3.7 Spiral Abyss was a frustrating one for many players, namely floor 12. The first chamber required you to have a way to deal with both a Hydro and Cryo Abyss Herald. Prior to Dendro, the best way to deal with Hydro Heralds was with a Cryo unit, but with there being a Cryo Herald, you also needed a Pyro character. Then if you look at Chamber 2, there was a Thunder Manifestation, reducing the efficiency of Raiden National, which would have been a perfect team for the first chamber's second half. But then you have Chamber 3. The Consecrated Beasts do crazy damage, necessitating a heavy shielder like Zhongli, which prevents you from using him to safeguard you for the second half. Then that Baptist jerk sequentially cycles through a fire, water, and ice shield. This made team building uncomfortably restrictive for a lot of players, to which I agree with. However, a part of me also found it to be quite refreshing. I had to plan ahead and carefully think about what characters I wanted to bring instead of brute forcing my way through everything with the same party. Was this the best way to do it? No, but there was at least an attempt. Countless times in the past, I've mentioned that what bothers me the most about Genshin is how we have such an extensive selection of units, elements, team comps, and strategies we could go for, but the game's content doesn't challenge or pressure us enough to make use of all of those combinations. So in practice, there's no point in theory crafting a bunch of different teams when you can just pick one team and clear everything just like that. We diversify for fun, but it's not enforced on us by the game, and it would be a more fulfilling experience if it did. Like I said, the ultimate focus of Genshin is on the characters, so we don't want weapons to overtake the meta, especially given how difficult it is to get them without spending money. Would I recommend doing it in the way they did Spiral Abyss 3.7? Absolutely not. Floor 12 punished those who didn't wail for every character or deck them out with 5-star weapons and constellations. Instead, the direction I recommend they take is to double down on the character focus actually. Let me explain. Right now, we can act under the assumption that weapons in Genshin hold no water, only the character and their element does, right? Players have brought out that certain unit weapon types don't exist yet. For example, we don't have a Hydro 4-star bow user. The only bow users are Child and Yelan, both 5 stars. We also don't have a Cryo Catalyst user. This could be an opportunity to encourage players to work on units they wouldn't have otherwise. Another franchise I'm a big fan of is Fire Emblem, and one of their most iconic mechanics is the weapon triangle. Sword speed axes, axes speed lances, and lances speed swords. They've expanded on that for some games, such as Anima Magic beating Light Magic winning over Dark, and Dark winning over Anima. While it doesn't prevent a sword unit from beating a lance unit, it adds a whole new level of thought put into how to efficiently clear the game. If there are any plans to add more weapon types, I wouldn't mind having some semblance of that in Genshin, such as the hypothetical I made earlier with gauntlets. If there's a cryo enemy with a one-shot kill attack that can be disabled by doing 100 hits in 30 seconds and a hit from a gauntlet counts as 2, that one pyro gauntlet user you never use is suddenly very useful. Or to repeat the enemy that requires heavy damage but is resistant to melee weapons, you can use a cannon unit. In totality, Genshin would not stand to benefit from having new weapon types because the game currently doesn't have the right foundation to enable that. But they could in the future. I feel like there's room for a lot of exploration in this field that can do wonders for the game's longevity. The only problem I see with this is that some characters might need to be reworked if that ever happens. If they ever add daggers as a weapon type, they'll need to figure out what to do with Shinobu, who uses a sword, but let's be honest, she gives off a very assassin vibe. Or if they add gauntlets, what do we do with Hazel? They sort of already eliminated what remaining expression weapons have, so realistically speaking, I'm not sure they have any intentions of creating more weapon types, but even if they don't, they can still work with their current selection. I wouldn't mind having a weapon triangle or something of the sort for the 5 types we have now. In fact, they already have it. Some of the bounty reputation enemies take bonus damage from certain types and are immune to others. They just have to expand it to the rest of the game. Give us an excuse to use Ningguang, Dori, Sayu. They shouldn't force us to use them, but the point is to give incentives. We need more incentives. Anyways, that's going to be it for today's video. I have a question for everyone. If MiHoYo ran a contest for adding a new weapon type, what would you choose and what special properties would you give it? I think it would be interesting if they added something like a whip or a chain, which would have very long range but bad area coverage. Or it would do more damage at the tip of the attack where you lash shit instead of up close. Something a bit more situational but better in those situations. I'm rambling at this point though. If you guys enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next one. Take care.